Hey, what's up, everybody? The Saints might not have really shown up yesterday, but we are back like we always are, and we will continue to be here to do the Football podcast. And we're going to have a great show. We're going to break down everything that went wrong, where the team's at, hit on all the major topics following Monday night's loss to the Baltimore Ravens. And if you need help with any of the following car wrecks, offshore injuries, 18-wheeler collisions, Maritime Jones Act, hurricane and storm claims, you better call BETTER at 504-323-7777 or at 985-303-7777 for your free consultation and case review, BETTERLaw.com. And as always, me and Mike are coming to you from the Better Call BETTER podcast studio. Kevin's off in his remote location. We're going to break everything down. And then when we're done with the show, we might head up to Veterans Boulevard and pick up some Firehouse subs because they got the best subs in the city and do great things for the community. Stick with us for an announcement. December, probably during the bye week, we are going to have a live event there. So you can come through, meet us, talk about the Saints, talk about their second round pick. I don't know, whatever's going on at that point, but we'll be up there at some point in December. So keep an ear out for that. And we'll have the announcement on Twitter once all the details are nailed down. And now it's time to get into the show.
Man, you just gotta I feel like I've been holding that Excel since like the game ended last night. The Saints took an L last night against the Ravens. Like Nick said, we're here to break it down. We're gonna be here regardless. Things got to get spoken about, and we're here to do it. So let's just get into it. I want to start big picture here, and Michael, I'll start with you. Before, and I asked the same question last week, and I'm asking again this week because I don't know, maybe a little foreshadowing here, but how did you feel about this team before the game? And now that you've seen them play the Ravens, and I see you look on your face, Mike, how do you feel about them after the fact?
They're making our job really, really hard because the Raiders win was too extreme. It's like hot takes. The Raiders win was too extreme. And the Ravens' loss was too extreme. I mean, isn't water supposed to find its level at some point? Why do they have their best win and then their worst loss halfway through the season? I mean, is this so I think you can throw the extremes out as neither one is the norm. But what is the norm? And I said this to you last week. I said their hardest commodity to find is going to be consistency all year. They're going to keep taking turns with wins and losses for the rest of the season. The only hope is that 7 or 8 wins could win the NFC South and they could get to 7 or 8 wins. But this is not a team that's going to figure it out and string 5 wins together. That's not realistic for any team in the NFL right now. It's certainly not realistic for this team. The one thing I thought was interesting, I went and looked it up. If they won all the games they were favored to win before kickoff and lost all the games they were favored to lose before kickoff, they're supposed to be 3-6. They're 3-6. So they're performing about as expected, but these, they were extremely higher and extremely lower than we expected in the last 2 weeks.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that. I mean, the possibility of this magical thing happening just doesn't exist. And I think maybe that's the most sobering thing from this game. That's my main takeaway from it, because I think before there was just kind of like, well, if they get healthy and if this happens and this happens, and you kind of keep that alive. And then last night you look up and you're like, man, the season's more than halfway over. Like, there's enough sample size here to know who they are. There's been enough eggs laid to know that they're a team that lays eggs. And you keep finding eggs in your yard. Like, that's what you are. You're a farmer of.
You have a problem with that? Do you have a problem with that? We could call somebody about that.
I know, but I mean that's just kind of where it's at, though. Like when you just keep making your bed the same way, that's how your bed's made. That's your talent level. That's what you do, and this is who they are. They're a team that's not going to beat a 6-3 team. Yeah. They shouldn't.
Right. And that was a legit 6-3 team. Like I'm the one comment I made that was wrong sometime last week, I think it was when we were on the sidelines watching practice, is, I said the opponent doesn't matter. The opponent mattered this time. The Ravens are a legit team. Like, there's probably some fake 6-3 teams out there right now, but the Ravens are one of the good ones, and they came to play, and they did all the things the Saints want to do better than the Saints. They out-physical the Saints team that wants to be physical. So the Saints aren't good enough to overcome opponents that are clearly better than them. Good news for the Saints, there's a lot of crappy teams in the NFL, so there's a lot of games they can win. And if they replayed this season over, they probably could have beat the Bengals, and they probably could have beat the Vikings, and they probably could have beat the Cardinals. And there's more teams like that on the schedule. But this team's not good enough to hang with a Ravens team that came in and played the way they played.
If they were handling business against who they should handle business against, the Cincinnatis, the Arizonas, the Carolinas. They could lose this game, and people would just kind of be like,
"Oh, they ran into a buzzsaw."
Yeah, like, oh, they're really good, and the Saints are just kind of like a 500 team, which is what I think they should be. They're underachieving for sure. They should be healthy. I think they should be around closer to 500, have a couple more wins maybe, but they don't, and they went and got punched in the mouth. And I understand the reason people are reacting the way they are, because this is just, it's not in the context of, okay, they lost to the Ravens. It's they lost to the Ravens and the Bengals and Arizona and all these other teams. And it feels like more of the same, even though I do think that this one, if you kind of really look at it analytically, it is a little bit different than some of the other losses.
Well,
it's the same, characteristics are still there. So
the most defining thing I noticed that was different, and I wrote about it in my post-game story, was every other loss, we're beating ourselves. We just keep beating ourselves. And everybody said last night, oh, they just beat us. Yeah. We just got beat tonight. And I asked a couple guys which one's better, and never really got a clear answer. But it is funny that this was like, oh, no, that team beat us.
Yeah.
We didn't beat ourselves. We did that too, but that team beat us.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing about this loss is not the fact that they lost, but I think it's how they lost. Like a lot of the Saints losses this season, they were competitive, right? You can say what you want to say about them, maybe up until a certain point, but they were competitive or they made a comeback. This game felt like it was over before it started almost. Yep. I mean, before it started is a little extreme, but shortly after looking at this game, it became apparent, what type of game this is going to be. And so, I just to answer my own question, this game doesn't change how I feel about them at all. I didn't think they were going to beat this team. I got a good friend. He was texting me before the game. He was trying to convince me that the Saints was going to win, right? Saints by 14, Saints by 10. And I told him, I was like, hey man, look, this team, it took me a while to lose confidence in them, and it's going to take a while for me. It's going to take them a while for them to regain my confidence, and that's where I think they are, right? And so,
I think it does change. I think we're all being a little phony here, all three of us, a little bit though, because like last week we're having conversations about like what can they do with Andy Dalton, and this week it's kind of like, oh, this is the real deal. So I think it does change just the confidence of everybody, and I think that's probably kind of natural because we saw really kind of like that underbelly of what it is and how low it can kind of go, and there is a helpless version of the Andy Dalton offense, which we hadn't seen before, and I think that does. I think I'm lying, and I think we're all kind of lying a little bit, just in the sense that I think it does change the overall view of things in that element. But I think the general big picture view of the team is ultimately.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I'm lying. I mean, because I started by saying it makes us look bad at our jobs because the results were so extreme. Like, I would have predicted them to lose to the Ravens, and actually, I probably would have predicted them to lose to the Raiders. But like, it makes sense that they beat the Raiders. It makes sense that they lost.
Oh yeah, no,
Ravens.
I agree with that.
It's the extreme results that are a little harder to comprehend. But I think we all thought the Saints were still going to lose at least 4, maybe 5 more games on this schedule. So we didn't think they had figured it out.
I mean the quarterback himself, though. Like, we isolate certain elements. I think that there are feelings about the overall feeling of this team that have changed, and he's a piece of it. So I think I know my feelings about Andy Dalton definitely changed. Like, I saw a lowness that I was kind of thought he set a higher floor, and that was kind of my thing with him, is that he sets a higher floor. But there is a version of him where he's helpless, and we saw that yesterday, and that was definitely something that changes my view on him in particular. As far as the fit into the whole team, I think I set a bar on who the quarterback is regardless. There's a limit, and I don't know that it changed my overall trajectory of the team. But I think for him individually, there are elements, like I'm going in circles here, but there are elements here that I think have changed a little bit.
Well, I'm sure Kevin's going to ask us about quarterbacks somewhere today, but this is another thing that I wrote is I didn't think too highly of Andy Dalton, but I thought Andy Dalton had proven to be the right fit for the style of offense that they wanted to run, which was to be a run first, move the chains, control the clock, throw 9 passes to Alvin Kamara, bring Taysom Hill in for 9 carries a game, and Andy Dalton could manage that. I never would have said, "Oh no, Andy Dalton's the right guy for being down 14 against the Ravens." So he's not going to play hero ball. Yeah, they
got down 14 because he couldn't get a first down.
Well, that's true too. But what I'm saying is he's not going to be the reason why they win. But if their offensive line can win at the line of scrimmage and they can, and they couldn't do any of those things last night, so he's not going to be the savior.
Their offense was so helpless yesterday that they ran twice in the 2-minute drill before the end of the first half and ate like 38 seconds they didn't need to eat, and they could have had that time back, and it would have been beneficial because they could have took a different approach closer to the end zone after the Callaway pass went incomplete, and it was a major thing in the game, and that was like kind of a concession of like we can't move the ball right now, and it was a little bit shocking actually to kind of see it like in the context of how they were sort of operating with him. And I'm not saying it was a high level. It's just the floor definitely lowered.
Yeah,
if you entered the elevator on 3 this time.
We talked about their ceiling raising last week, and now we see a lower floor than we knew they had this week for sure.
Yeah. I mean, I get that point, but I don't think any different of Andy Dalton after this game. Andy Dalton has always been a guy who has been a product of what was around him, right? When there was a lot of talent and things were operating fine around him, I think that he's a serviceable, a good quarterback at times. I mean, he had one season where he was, I don't know if people say MVP, but I don't know if he was playing that well, but he was playing well. But this was a game where the things around him wasn't going well, and I think it shows. So I think that, like Andy Dalton will, he's kind of pragmatic in a way with the team, as in if things are going well with the team, I think he's going to look well. And if things are not going well, I think he's going to look like someone that you want to replace. And that's why I think he said he's had 5 different offenses in the last 5 years. I think he was doing an interview, or they was talking about an interview with him, and he said like since 2017, this is his new offense every year or something along those lines, basically. And, when a guy's been that many places, then there's typically a reason why, right? Someone's not, locking him up. And I just think that, I feel like they leaned a little bit too heavy on him in this game. We can transition into, just talking about quarterback. And, Nick, I know you and I were texting about it a little bit, and, I'll let you get into the details, but I just thought the approach to this game as it pertains to, the offense, I just didn't think it was a good approach. And I'm not saying that because it didn't work, because sometimes offensive game plans don't work. But I just thought that, any game plan that doesn't have Taysom in it fundamentally, I think it's going to be problematic. So, like, what's your thoughts on how they approach this game offensively, and, some of the things that they maybe should potentially do different at quarterback? Maybe replacing them, maybe not, or maybe just switching up some snaps. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I thought maybe they conceded a little bit too much. It felt like they looked at their linebackers and they just felt like, all right, we aren't gonna do these things. We aren't gonna run to the outside. We aren't gonna use any screen passes. The most baffling moment in the whole game to me, though, is 3rd and 1. They run running back power.
Yeah.
With Alvin Kamara, like you're packing everybody in. You're telling everybody you're running the ball, and they use running back power. Now it's early in the game, so it happens, and I'm like, all right, whatever. Like you're gonna run the ball with Alvin. Then I watch the rest of the game, and they don't run any quarterback power at all. Not a single quarterback power play, and that is arguably their most successful play in their playbook. And they just decided, hey, we aren't going to use it.
Baffling.
And you can't even tell me that it's just this thing where, well, they didn't think the power plays would work. Well, they ran a power play on 3rd and 1, and you didn't run it with your power player. It didn't make a lot of sense to me. I mean, some of the lack of Taysom in the game, just quickly rewatching the offensive snaps this morning, made some sense.
That probably took about 8 minutes for you to watch every offensive snap.
Watch all the running plays. Yeah, it didn't take too long. But yeah, I mean, look, I thought they defended them really well. Yeah. They actually forced Taysom to hand the ball off, and Taysom doesn't hand the ball off even when he should hand the ball off. But it was like it was to the point where it was like, all right, I got to hand the ball off. So I think maybe being in practice, playing against Lamar Jackson every day, maybe has that defense very in tune on how to defend these plays. So some of it, but the complete concession of it just made no sense to me. And I said this on the members only last night. Like sometimes Sean would run plays just to tell a story so he could set something else up. So like they did hit a Taysom pass in this game, but I think that you could even sell that stuff even more if you're like, all right, we're gonna burn 4 snaps out of this look, and then we're gonna hit Rashid Shaheed down the field on a bomb because we're gonna draw everybody up and they're gonna just be lulled into this. And like Sean would do that a lot, and you would kind of see the storytelling with his plays. You'd be like, man, why are they running this play that doesn't work? And then in the fourth quarter, now they're going to Brandon Cooks out of a 3 tight end personnel that was gaining 1.7 yards per carry. And I just thought they conceded their strengths too much, and they allowed Baltimore to dictate who they were instead of trying to dictate who they are to Baltimore.
Well, there's
Yeah,
one thing that is like a NFL truism that we saw last night, and that's if they had any chess plan whatsoever, they they were just pulling their pawns back
Yeah.
and playing, like they couldn't set anything up because it was 3 and out. And then it was 3 and out. And then maybe there was a 4 and out, but I mean, they had the ball for 22 minutes. However many snaps they played on offense is only not some stunningly low number like 35 because of the 2-minute drills at the end of each half. So any plan they had never came together. You're supposed to set things up. That means converting at least 1 first down. But there were opportunities. But it's not like we never got to the time of the game where we're going to use Taysom because on the second drive they had 3rd and 3 and second and 3 and 3rd and 1. And then on 2 drives later, they had 3rd and 3. So they did have moments where it was the obvious choice to bring in Taysom and at least see how Baltimore reacts. Like you said, that 1-yard run where they just ran into a wall where they were set up and they had no other option. Andy Dalton got himself in trouble in a tight formation too. I mean, where's spreading things out? Like, how many times did we see Lamar Jackson spread out and it's impossible to defend that when he's running sideways and he could throw or pass like that. You've said a million times, it's impossible to defend when Taysom Hill's running. They made themselves easy to defend, I thought. So I thought they had a really poor plan. Although I do think Taysom Hill would have had his worst performance of the season. I mean, look, the first time he ran the ball, they get called for holding. He only gained 3 yards anyway, and they got called for holding, and it's a 10-yard loss. So things were going to fail. It's not like Taysom Hill was going to gain his – yeah, right. But what I'm saying is he would have struggled too, but he would have been better than what we saw.
I don't think anyone is going to consider the Saints offense as the model of consistency, right? But the one thing that I would say, and Nick, you alluded to, and I think you're right, is that is probably the most consistent thing in their offense, right? A Taysom Hill run in short yardage. So I think that when you're in offense and you're struggling like you are, and you don't really have a lot of things to hang your hat on, I don't think it should really overly matter what you're seeing from the deep. I mean, listen, when you play the Ravens, right, I'm pretty sure 65 to 70% of the game plan is spent on stopping Lamar Jackson's legs, right? And so they know that, the Ravens know that, and they run it anyway because. And if you stop them if you stop them for a little bit, then they're going to keep doing it, right? And I just think that, when you're down 2 of your best 3 wide receivers and you have a journeyman as a quarterback, I think if a run play is your best play, specifically when it's 2nd and 3 and 3rd and 1, then you got to run it. You got to run it. Whatever they're doing on the other side, it don't matter because the matchup that you're going to get with Taysom running his power is still going to be better than the alternative. So I just think that, I just thought the approach, was a little bit off there.
Saints have good linebackers too, 2 really good linebackers, and it didn't stop. They didn't say, "Well, Lamar's not going to be able to beat these guys."
Yeah, they run the plays that they run, right? And
their defense knows how to stop an option run though. And
that's true. Which that's a whole nother podcast or topic there. But
and real quick, I actually thought they did better against this type of quarterback this time. They just couldn't tackle him. And that and it wasn't just a Lamar issue. Like you have Davenport going high and missing. Like it was technique issue as well. Like and some of it's Lamar, some of it's technique, but they were getting to him in a way that they weren't getting to other people. They were attacking them. They were there. They just they couldn't make the plays.
Yeah, you're hitting a very non-static target when Lamar Jackson. So I mean, those guys that got pressure and they miss Lamar. I can't. That's just the price of doing business against the Ravens. Sometimes.
I can't give him a pass though, just because we've seen it so many times. It just falls in the same umbrella. Like if it was isolated, and what you're saying, I agree with. I think it's logical to say, hey, this is going to happen against Lamar, but like when it happens against everybody, and then you see some guys going high, like instead of, it's kind of falls under the same umbrella too. Like it's probably a little bit of both, but like the umbrella is probably shifted a little bit to the left because like there's this Lamar element on the other side.
I will
Yeah,
say this though. This was my most optimistic take that I came up with last night is like for a team that is struggling to tackle, they don't have to see him for 4 more years. So that
Yeah, there
they
you go.
do have Jalen Hurts again this year though.
yeah, they better hope he holds out for the Ravens and demand a trade and something because you don't want to see him ever again the way that went. But so do you? There's some chatter, and let's just talk about it, right? Andy Dalton played. He didn't play well last night. I don't think anyone played well last night. Do you think they should they look at something different at the quarterback position? And I want to paraphrase the question because I think what DA did was say Andy's our starter going forward. And he kind of, I think I don't want to say he kind of set it in stone, but it sounded like in the short term, and even last night he gave him a vote of confidence.
Yeah.
Do you think they should have did something different? And two, do you think, DA should kind of keep his options open as it pertains to quarterback, right? You have two guys, and neither guy is probably better than the other. They probably just have some strengths and some weaknesses in, said areas. Do you think it's something that he should roll with it and say, "Hey, Andy's my guy"? Or do you think he should be open to maybe switching the quarterback if a guy's isn't playing well in any given game?
Well, DA's explanation or the way he worded it was as long as the offense is playing well, we're going to stick with Andy. So that made it seem like an indefinite or long-term thing, but it leaves open the window that if the offense is not playing well, we'll consider other options. Last night, he said he didn't consider singling out the quarterback as the thing to, he said everybody had dirty hands, the entire offense was playing bad, so I didn't consider a quarterback change. That wouldn't have been the solution. And I'm going to chalk this up as one bad day at the office for the offense and hope we can get back to it 6 days from now in Pittsburgh. So I would be a little surprised if they took one horrible failed offensive performance across the board and said that undoes all of the gains they've made with Andy Dalton at quarterback over the last 5 weeks that Dennis Allen has obviously been very happy with. But I think it puts them on notice if they only score 3 points in the first half at Pittsburgh and finish with only 13 points at Pittsburgh and a team they're supposed to beat that is not the Ravens. That might be enough to make the change, even before the game is over. I do think this kind of game script, I would have probably rather had Jameis Winston in there, needing some form of offense, being down by 14 points. That favors Jameis Winston more than Andy Dalton. Andy Dalton is better if you're trying to protect a lead and play, methodical playing style. But I would be pretty surprised, and I don't think that one total flop by everyone involved is enough to be like, all right, well, that's, I mean, if we're going to be changing quarterbacks every other week if every time because they're going to have a bad game once every 2 or 3 weeks. So I think we need to see 2 flops before they make the switch. But hey, look, everything is fair game right now because Dalton wasn't good enough to save them from the wreckage last night.
Maybe. Look, I don't know. I mean, like I could have seen this game maybe going either way with Jameis. The way
Yeah.
they were pressuring and bringing stuff, and the way they were handling that earlier in the season with him at quarterback, this might have been completely different, and it might have been worse. Like you might have ended up in mistakes. There might have been more sacks, your field position. And look, I think Andy Dalton did a poor job against pressure, just handling it, his
Yes.
nerves. And
Yeah.
I'll give Jameis credit there in situations where they have had to fight back and you're late in the game. There's more confidence in the quarterback position with him there.
Yeah.
Like he's more comfortable trying to lead it. Every single time we've
Yeah.
seen Andy in a high pressure situation, he's kind of looked jittery a little bit. And I don't know if that's unfair in a small sample, but I think we saw it in Arizona. Definitely saw it at the end of the Cincinnati game. They needed a first down to win the game, and he became inaccurate out of nowhere at that point of the game through 2 passes that should have been completed. They didn't connect. This game at the end of the first half, inaccurate on 2 balls to the end zone. Callaway should have scored, passes off the mark. He had Olave, passes off the mark. And then as the game progressed, you kind of saw him unravel a little bit more. So I think there's pros and cons to both.
Yeah.
If they would have handled pressure in the blitzed in the same exact way in this game, and it all fits together, and it's hard to know where to parse that exactly between offensive line and quarterback.
Right.
There are stuff that both groups are doing. Maybe the offensive line has just gotten into better shape. I know, just being fair, there was some stuff earlier in the season that I felt like Jameis didn't see as clearly as he should have. He was dealing with a lot physically. I don't know
Well,
whatever.
yeah, this is a
whatever.
moot point if Jameis isn't healthy. Yeah,
Just
you
with
only go. Yeah,
identification though. But
you
like,
only
I don't know if that led into
Jameis has to
spiral.
be. I mean, one of the things that makes Jameis special is like the Ben Roethlisberger
Yeah, but I'm not even talking
comparisons where if pressure comes and he can sidestep it and he can maybe make a guy miss or bounce off of him. If it's Jameis from the first 3 weeks who was a statue, then he's not even part of the conversation.
I'm talking about like some of the blitzes against Carolina that like just weren't seen, and the coverage just wasn't seen, and like who's supposed to see it, who's supposed to call it out. I know the quarterback has some responsibility, so I don't know. Like, but again, he was dealing with a lot. I don't know where he's at in his head in those games. If he's completely just out of sort, like he might have just not felt like himself, and things just kind of spiraled a little bit for him, and some of that stuff was rough. I didn't think last year that they had those same issues, and that was the same process and everything. So Andy was playing with different centers and stuff. So I mean, like it's likely that he'd probably be able to see some of that stuff at least equally into the same level in this game. But if not, like that is one element that I do think has improved. It's just hard to know exactly why it's improved.
Yeah, but I mean, I guess it's close enough that I don't think it can just be a quarter to quarter, half to half, not even probably week to week decision. It probably has to be a trend has to develop,
To
like
your point too, if he can move and some of this stuff isn't getting picked up, even at the same level as yesterday, he can at least escape somewhere. Whereas I think
I would have rather had a healthy Jameis in the game last night than Dalton, without question. But the question is, we're talking about Pittsburgh now. Who gives them a better chance to win at Pittsburgh? I think they want to keep recapturing what has worked when it has worked, as recently as 8 days ago against the Raiders when it worked better than ever. And like I said, they threw the ball to Alvin Kamara 9 times. That's what they want this offense to look like, and they think Andy Dalton can run it. But his grip on that is paper.
Let me drill you on this though. Like drill you down on this take. Like, why isn't your good team quarterback also the better option against bad teams then?
Well, what I'm saying is
if Jameis is the good team quarterback, like why isn't he the bad team quarterback?
You never want to be down by 14 points in a mode where you have to throw on almost every down and the defense is teeing off on you. If you get into that mode, then I would rather see Jameis, because Dalton could do nothing at that point. But I think Andy Dalton, they believe the offense they're running with Andy Dalton, and I've said a million times, I think Jameis still deserves a chance to prove he can run the offense they want to run. We used to say get the ball to Alvin Kamara, Mike Thomas, and Jarvis Landry. Let's start with just get it to Alvin Kamara, maybe Jarvis Landry if he ever comes back to this team. We know Mike Thomas is not coming back. But we know that's the offense they want to run. The high percentage throws, move the chains offense, not, and that only works when it works. When you're down, they don't ever want to be down by 14 and having to face a team that's teeing off on them. But if they are, then I'd rather have Jameis in the game. But I mean, they just want to avoid that situation entirely. And I think they've made the decision that Andy Dalton is the best option to avoid those situations. But if they go into Pittsburgh and they're down by 14 at Pittsburgh, then I think the clock will already run out on that.
It's a tough way to live if you're living this version of the offense where everything has to be perfect for it to succeed. And I think I don't have a strong enough take on either one. Like,
not
I don't
perfect. It just can't be. I mean,
well, if things go bad, he can't get
like
you out.
The Cincinnati game was okay. Well, the Arizona game was okay. He had 2 bad, horrible pick sixes right before halftime, but then he bounced back and played okay in the second half of the game. But what I mean is, like derail. It doesn't have to be perfect, but I'm not going to stand on a table for either one of these guys. I'm just saying that I did not think last night's game. We've heard how many times Dennis Allen has said he really likes the offense for 5 weeks over the last 5 weeks. I don't think last night's game alone is enough to make him change his mind on that. But it's close. It's really close now. We're 1 week away from a potential change.
At least 33% of the season is derailed. So like a 30-year games do derail. So you kind of are operating in a way. I don't have a strong take on either one. To answer Kevin's question, like I get people on both sides. Oh, you want Andy, you want Jameis. Like I don't have a strong opinion on either one of these guys. My opinion is until we see something completely different, they need a quarterback.
Should they give Taysom a chance?
I mean, look, if the season completely falls apart, look, here's where I'm at with it. I don't think I don't think if I were running the team, I don't know if I would make a change right now because I think it would look like panic. And a week ago, I wasn't announcing Andy Dalton as my permanent starter if I'm the head coach or signing him to an extension. Bad games are going to happen in the NFL. So I think you have to allow him the ability to play after that bad game, after you've already given him the vote of confidence. Going back to the beginning, me running the team, I wouldn't have said, hey, this is my guy. Like, I would have just
Right.
let the injury and quietly been like, well, Jameis isn't healthy and
Yeah.
we're going to keep rolling with it. Whether Jameis was healthy or not, I would have used that as a shield as long as I could.
That's
if
what
I
you would
wanted
have
to
said
evaluate him.
publicly, though, but you
Yeah.
would have made the same decisions. You would
Yeah.
not have switched back to Jameis Winston yet at this point.
Probably not.
Yeah.
Probably not because the offense was rolling.
You just disagree with how he framed it.
Yeah.
More
No,
than
but
the
I'm
actual
just saying if
decision
I
he
was
made.
running, like if I was running it, and I would probably be the one argument that I saw, and I would agree with this to some extent, if you have the thought in your mind, like, should Jameis be the quarterback? And this is where I think it gets interesting, is that if you send him Dalton into Pittsburgh, he probably has a decent chance of winning, regardless of what we just saw, how down and out everybody in the world is about this team. They have they're favored to win, I believe. I think I saw that. They're favored to win. So they have a decent shot of winning. So they go in there and win. And now Dalton remains your quarterback against better opponents. If you have any type of thought that, like, should we get Jameis in there? Could he give us a better chance to win?
This is a get him going game.
You make the switch now so that you maybe win 2 of the next 3. But if you go Dalton and you're like, man, I don't know, there's a better chance that he loses 2 of those.
Well, there's 2 different conversations. There's the if I run the team conversation, which you just brought up, and we can continue to have that debate because it's a fascinating one. But Dennis Allen runs the team, and I think we very clearly know his preference is for the Andy Dalton run offense that we've seen over the last 5 weeks to continue working. He's like, I'm good. Like, he knows that, he's got either, he either gets 10 jack offsuit or a pair of 2s. Those are his only options. You know what I mean? Like, he's not going to get kings or aces. And he's like, this one's working. Let's stick with this. Like, I've seen some positive things from the offense. I'm trying to fix my defense. I like it. I'm not going to mess with it. I'll take this. B-level offense that we've been seeing over the last 4 weeks. So he's happy with that. He wants to find that. He'll settle for that. That's good enough for him. So I don't think he thinks, if I switch to Jameis, we might get an A+ off it. Like, I don't think he's thinking that way right now.
Let's get the temperature of the room. DJ, get your mic ready too. Kevin, who you going with?
If I had to start this next game, I would start Andy Dalton. Just because, like I said, I feel the same way about him after the Raider game, after I knew about this one. I think he's the same player. I just think that when stuff around him, the pressure was there, the run game wasn't working, the defense wasn't dominating, then he starts to look like the guy that's played on a few different teams in the last few years. So I think I would just go with Andy Dalton. And by the way, and just one quick aside, not to derail, but I think if you're a DA, if you feel like any given week a different quarterback can give you a chance to win, I think you at this point you're just trying to find a win.
Yeah,
I don't care about whose feelings get hurt. None of that matters. None of these guys are in a position to have enough leverage to say, "Hey, if you start me, I'm going to feel bad." Like, all right, what are you going to do? Go on the team and go in free agency and get a 5-year deal? No. So I'm going to. They need to be focusing on not giving the Eagles a top 10 pick and trying to salvage as much as they can from the season. If that means starting whoever's going to be the quarterback this week that you think is going to give them the best chance to win, then that's what you got to do.
That's interesting because everybody's feelings are probably already hurt anyhow, and every quarterback on that team knows they're looking for somebody else this offseason. And if they come back, they come back, and they're going to have to come back and buy in, and the team's going to have to buy in because they're going to need each other at that point. So that is interesting. Who you got this week, DJ?
I'm going with Jameis.
You're going with Jameis.
Oh, he's ready.
Oh, Parks on the board. DJ.
You got nothing to lose at this point. Like, if I'm DA, I just got to go out swinging. Like,
so you've lost faith in Andy at this point.
I lost faith in the team. Like,
I mean, welcome to the club, DJ. I mean, yeah.
Swing for the fence, go with Jameis, see what you got, and that's it.
All right. So
wait, you didn't answer
this week. I did. I think
You said Andy.
Yeah, I think I stick with Andy because in the situation they're in, I don't want to look like I'm panicking.
Yeah, no, you're right. You did say that. And I'm with you
if
too.
You panic, like, now you're sending out the wrong signals to the locker room. I think they need to see him fail one more time. I think he has one more game.
Yep.
And if he
I agree.
doesn't play well in this game, I'm back on Jameis. There's a part of me that agrees with the Jameis opinions in this room. Like
Yeah.
what do you have to
No, I
lose at
think
this
what
point?
DJ said, and I'll put a line on. Yeah, I mean, if they're 3-7, I agree completely with what DJ said. I think Andy Dalton gives you the best chance to be 4-6. So if you're still clinging to hopes of salvaging 2022, you stick with Andy Dalton for one more week, and as soon as you lose 2 games in a row, and then feelings do come into it. I think if you're 4 games below 500, and you're not 1 game out of first anymore, Jameis deserves his chance to say, "Hey, now that I'm healthy, can I please show everyone what I
Well,
look like,
Does he?
please?" Because yeah, I think
Nobody.
so.
I
He
don't think
played with
any
a
of these.
broken back in weeks 2 and 3. I
I
mean,
mean,
like,
he's
they
tough, but I
picked
don't think.
him. They picked him. They traded away next year's first round pick. They signed him to a 2-year deal. They spent a lot of money on him. I mean, deserves might not be the right word,
Deserves, yeah. I'm on
but like,
deserves because I don't think any one of
but
these guys deserve. I don't think they've
yeah.
shown that they
No,
deserve
if you're
anything
trying
at
to
this
win,
point.
but what I'm saying is at some point, if the season is lost, you're being you're doing a
Yeah.
disservice to Jameis if you don't get him,
Well, you're doing a
if you don't
disservice
give
to
him an
yourself.
Yeah. Okay.
opportunity.
You're doing a
Okay.
disservice
Okay.
to
Right, but
yourself.
if you
Yeah.
don't give an
Yeah.
opportunity to be like, "All right, I'm healthy now. Can I please not go out like this? Like, we're not winning anyway.
Yeah.
We're eliminated from the playoff race. Can I not have my career obituary be written?"
See, but I
You
don't think
know,
that should come into the Saints thinking. I
Yeah.
don't think
That's a Jameis thing,
yeah,
right?
if someone can come in and take your lunch, you don't eat, and that's
It's
on you. You
gone.
gotta
Yeah.
but
protect your lunch.
but I'm saying
But I think the
if
team
his
owes it
lunch
to
is not
itself.
being taken,
Wi-
if
Right.
if Andy Dalton loses 3 out of 4
Right, but that's
in November, then how do you let
right.
Jameis
But when you
just
say the
sit
word
there?
when
Yeah,
you say the word deserve, it means that
yeah.
like no matter what happens, like they have to no, Andy, like this is Jameis's. Like,
No.
no, he doesn't deserve that. Nobody deserves
No, I'm
that.
saying if Andy's
Aaron
playing like crap.
Aaron
Yeah,
Rodgers is playing bad. If
yeah,
Jordan Love comes in and takes his job, that's on Aaron Rodgers. Like that,
yeah.
nobody is owed anything, I think, anywhere. But I think the team, they get eliminated. I agree with you 100%. And it's about them more than anybody else. They need to find out, what can this guy do? Like, who is he? I think that they have painted a picture of it. I think their actions to stick with Dalton tells us something about their thinking. Health is such a weird thing here because there's people on both the public opinion and the opinion
Yeah, I
behind the
think
scenes
again,
is
I think it's
different.
a moot point
Yeah.
because I doubt Jameis is 100% healthy, and he's
He's
going
not
to come
gonna
in
be.
and yeah,
We know
yeah,
100% he's not
yeah,
the back injury, like what we know about it, and
and
that
the foot
he
injury,
has
yeah.
the tendon injury. So given the timeline on that, like he's not gonna be. But I think that he's probably at a place where he's healthy enough to play at a reasonable level. And yeah, I think that they get to a point they got to find out though. Like if they're not making the playoffs, they have to find out what Jameis can do. I mean, there's no question that we know exactly what Andy Dalton's going to be. There's still like a element of unknown, even though I think some of the unknown element has been kind of shown to some degree, but there's still a piece of it. There's still a piece of it to whereas, all right, like give this guy a decent team, a decent offensive line, better play calling. What can they be? And look, if he gets back in the game, though, like I don't want to see Pete Carmichael calling 7 deep shots in one game anymore either. Like you gotta
Yeah,
allow him to do.
you
If you want him to run this offense, let him run this offense and tell him.
you marry the 2 things together. This is the offense that works for us. Now, can you run it and add your elements and
Yeah.
your strengths to it? But you better throw 5 passes to Alvin Kamara on time, early, quick, 3-step drop, first read, throw them, mix those in along with some of the,
But see, I think
specialties that
that
you bring to the table.
I think that that's part of why Andy Dalton's playing, though, right? I
Yeah.
mean, they're in the building every
That's
day.
the
They
main
see this.
reason why, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they see this like, hey, let's just get the ball out. Let's not turn the ball over. Let's not shoot us. Now that's not working out. I mean, that is the theory of Andy Dalton, right? Now, in reality, it doesn't always play out like that. But I think if they thought that, hey, he's going to protect the ball, he's going to get the ball to Kamara, I think he would be starting, right? They're in practice with him every day. They see him every day. So I just think that, I wouldn't make the assumption, that this guy's going to come in and change the type of quarterback who he's always struggled to get the ball
Yeah,
to Kamara,
I
right?
want to see Pete, grabbing the face mask, like, "Ugh," like, come on, man, what are you doing? Like I want to see him. I want to see like hard coaching on it. Like, make him
Yeah,
do it, and if he can't,
yeah,
then fine, that's cool. But like, you have to. I think you have to push. They get eliminated. Like, you have to push this because there is a very good chance that you are in this situation where you're looking at guys that are in the building as possibilities. And if you're going to do this again next year, like the approach has to be Alvin, Shaheed, not Shaheed,
No.
Alvin.
You're missing like 7 Olaves in there because freaking every time they throw to Olave, it was the best decision they
It's
made,
the
at least
best
last night.
player on the team. Yeah. Poor DA, man. I mean, it's almost like, he's in a situation where you want to wrestle with the crocodile or the alligator. It's like,
But I mean,
I don't want to get in the pond, man.
This is the greater point about this whole team, though. Like, we're parsing how good of a coach Dennis Allen is, and we're parsing how good of a quarterback Andy Dalton is, or how good of a quarterback Jameis Winston is. If we were going to get someone like Field Yates, our guest from last week, or any national analyst to rank where these coaches, it's probably about the 24th best coach in the league. Oh, you've probably got about the 26th best quarterback duo on the league. They're performing at about expected level. Like searching. I mean, this is the reality of the Saints right now.
Well, I mean, I think it brings up the question, like, how many wins is a coach worth, right? I mean, because you could make the case that, the offense was in a worse position last year, and you got similar, personnel on defense. So, yeah,
probably a better quarterback situation right now than they had once.
Yeah, with Simeon and Taysom, and then oh gosh, Ian Book seems like 3 years ago at this point. It's just so much has changed. It's almost like every decision they've made this offseason has kind of bit them, come back to bit them in the butt. And that makes me think like there is some parity between last year's team and this year's team, and it's the injuries. And how much would you attribute the struggles and the failures of this year's team to injuries versus, hey, these guys are, you can't, I mean, I don't like DA say, hey, well, we just had a bad day at the office. I'm like, well, you've had 6 of those. It's not a bad day at the office no more. It's a trend, right? And so how much would you say, all right, this team is injured? If they were, if they can get healthy, they can maybe stare at 500 in some way, shape, or form? Or is it just like, no, this is who you guys are, and it doesn't, it's kind of written in stone at this point?
I think realistically, I mean, there is some element of the injuries. I think not having Marshawn matters. I think not having Jarvis Landry matters. I think Mike Thomas being out matters. I think Pete Werner being injured now matters. I think all this stuff matters, and it does have an effect on it. But I also have seen games where they were in positions to win despite injuries.
Yeah.
And I don't take Cincinnati as an excusable game. I think they should have beat Carolina. I don't take that as, Jameis is out there playing hurt, but they still could have won that game. And maybe there should have been a decision not to play the hurt player if he's an element of that loss.
Sure.
So I mean,
Yep.
I think to some degree it's logical, and you have to look at that because we talk about talent. Talent matters. It does. It counts. It matters. It's not making an excuse to acknowledge that, hey, Marshawn Lattimore is a better outside cornerback than Chris Harris. Like, it's just, yeah, obviously this is why you don't just sign Chris Harris's. So it does matter. But yeah, I can't excuse the whole season. I can't just give a reprieve.
Both can be
on
true.
everything.
It's okay. I mean, it's okay. Like, this is what we do on this podcast. We admit that both can be true. Like,
that's why I said That's why I said how much, not which one, right? Yeah.
Like, we said this before. I mean, how many games did they lose in the first 8 weeks of this season where people saw the inactive list and said, why are they even going to bother trying? And they barely lost to Cincinnati, and they, lost a close game to Tampa Bay without Alvin Kamara playing and with Jameis playing with a broken back. And they went into Carolina, and Jameis was too hurt and Alvin was too hurt. And yeah, the Cincinnati game was a close game where Joe Burrow just attacked Chris Harris in the slot the entire time because they had to pluck him off the street and throw him in there. And then in Arizona, they had no cornerbacks playing. And, I mean, I think a healthy Saints team, especially the caliber of players they were losing, probably could have won 2 more games than they've won so far. But this is not the conversation to be having after last night because, they were going to lose last night. Even, Marshawn Lattimore wasn't saving last night.
Yeah.
I just wish they had played well enough that we could just be sitting here and be like, oh, well, the Ravens game was an L on paper before the season, and then they lost Marshawn and Jarvis Landry and Mike Thomas, and Eric McCoy got hurt during the game, and Pete Werner got hurt during the game, and Marcus Davenport got hurt during the game. So, of course, they lost. But you can't do that because they didn't handle the business that they were supposed to handle in other places.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Oh, that's a good point. Um, one of the biggest issues I think that the Saints have had this season is easily, I think it's been the defense. And so, that was supposed to be their sticking point. And so, I've seen cases before, like the most recent one is I think is it happened in the Chargers, where they hired a defensive, minded head coach, and then turns out the defense, starts to struggle. And I'm just I've been thinking, like, what do you make of the defense being so drastically inferior than they've been since 2000? I think this is maybe the worst year since 16 or something, if I'm just thinking off the top of my head. Maybe there's some other, another year in that I'm missing, but Da, I mean, he kind of he's a defensive minded head coach. That's how I got into this league. That's how he's been a head coach 2 different times. And so, like, what do you just make of someone who is so involved defensively, but his unit is struggling so hard? Do you think it's added responsibilities? Do you think it's, and another point to this, and then I'll, pass it to you guys to give your thoughts on it, is, typically you don't see defenses play well for like super long. It's almost like good defenses have like a 3 or 4 year stretch, and then it kind of starts to fall off a little bit unless you're just replenishing talent. And I don't know if the Saints are there yet. It feels like it, but yeah, just what do you attribute to the defense falling off as much as it has? Because it's much more than I even considered, to be honest with you, at this point. Sometimes they look just flat out bad, and that's just shocking to see. With the same, you look at the players from last year and you look at the guys from this year, it's hard to think that you're in the same universe with those guys playing as they are.
Well, I mean, you don't have the same guys as last year, and I think that's kind of where it starts. Like, look at the Jets. Like, you bring Sauce Gardner in there, and all of a sudden they're completely different. And that's the impact that like a real shutdown type of cornerback has on a whole entire team. So Marshawn being injured, I think, is a significant factor. You're in a dime package. 4 out of the 5 guys from last year aren't there this year right now, and Debo's the only holdover. I think that's a huge thing. And then watching this game in particular, I thought that busted coverages were a bigger deal than missed
Mhm.
tackles. I mean, that was the thing that kind of killed them early on. I thought they actually did a decent job of
Yeah, just
within
early, but Lamar ended up only completing 11 passes, but in that, yeah,
within
that
context
was enough
though.
to set the tone. Yeah.
Within context, so like I thought they limited their running game early, but then it was the
Yep.
coverage bust that
Yep.
kind of killed them. And every time that it got to a third and long or whatever, like there was somebody running free in space, and then you rewatch the plays, and kind of it kind of looked like it was on the safeties in many of those
Yeah.
situations. So I just think like that organization that they had before, and it took time to get there with Malcolm and Marcus Williams, but like I just don't know that it's there right now. And I don't know if that's a coaching issue as much as like these guys have played a lot of football, and they're just making some mistakes. And I think sometimes that stuff happens, and not everything that goes wrong is a coaching issue, but it does end up going back to coaching because it's their job to get it corrected. And this is the defense they wanted to have. These are the players they wanted to have. Like you gotta make that work. And right now it's hit or miss a little bit. And I think that's the biggest issue for me when I watch the team.
Yeah, I mean, it's another both answer. I mean, obviously the talent is not what it was, and funny enough, I was a little worried that the defense was gonna drop off this year, and part of my worry was that Cam Jordan and Demario Davis are both, like, 32 years old. They haven't been the problem in my mind.
No.
Those 2 guys have not dropped off, but just about everyone else on the entire defense has. Marcus Davenport is, he was doing better than I think some fans think with the fact that he has 0 sacks, but he's not taking the step forward. I thought he had to be
Yeah,
last year he looked like
a
elite in the
wrecker.
second half of the season, and I thought he had to take a step forward from that. He has not. Every decision they've made in the secondary, from letting Marcus Williams and CJ Gardner Johnson go to bringing in Tyrann Mathieu and Marcus May, has been a drop off. I think Malcolm Jenkins retired. I don't know exactly what we would have expected out of him at however old he was, but and then the Marshawn Lattimore injury has been a disaster because Paulson Adebo is also hurt, but has also dropped off a little bit. Bradley Roby also got hurt. So, I mean, it's a combination of all those things, but there's not a single area outside of Pete Werner where they've improved this year. They've gotten worse in every other area.
I think it's fair to say that Davenport's taken some step back. Like he's still getting good pressure and everything. But look, he played 11 games last year and had 9 sacks. Through 9 games, he has a half a sack. So I mean, there is some step
And
back.
there's-
You do have to finish
Oh yeah,
plays.
no, I said he has. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Well,
okay,
I'll
okay,
say, I
my
mean,
bad.
I
Yeah, but
mean,
probably not as drastic.
Not as drastic as some people.
outside those,
And meanwhile, they're doing nothing special.
Yeah.
Are they last in the league in forced takeaways? I know they had some forced fumbles and a couple came on special teams. Definitely last in the league on interceptions. They are not making any game-changing plays.
Part of Davenport's issue is what we were just saying: 4 out of 5 guys missing, changeover in the secondary, and not being quite as good, and that does affect the pass rush for sure.
yeah. I mean, he's not been good enough this year, regardless if it's, he's a player that they need.
Well, they called him
He
the
ne-
best player on the team, Kev.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like you can't have a half a sack after that's
You
that's
can't
how
call
you're
him,
talking
yeah,
about him.
exactly. And even if you got a half a sack, you need to be clearly, like, even in games last year when he wasn't getting sacks, you could just look at offensive linemen flying all over the place, and you knew who created the play. Like, it really wasn't a secret. You see a guy flying off the screen, 92 was probably somewhere near, and just to be honest with you, he hasn't been that player. He's not that player. He's not been good enough, and it's been a disappointment. And I think it's part of the reason why the defense has struggled, because if he's dominating up there, I think that you give those guys on this back end. Like, say for instance, DA said, I think last week, he said pass defense is the greatest indicator of team defense because the back end and the front end have to come together and do their job, right? And so if you're limited on the back end, then as a guy up front, I'm thinking, all right, I got to step it up a little bit to cover up for some of the guys who was injured back there, and that's just not happening. And it's him. It's I mean, I think it's Cam too. I mean, I don't think Cam is playing horrible or anything like that, but he's not. He hasn't picked up the slack. Peyton Turner's played a little bit better, but nothing to get too excited about. Street, and we haven't heard much from him. So Onyemata, like, nope, these guys aren't stepping up. And
Hey,
I think
Onyemata last 2. You got to give him a little credit.
Ooh.
Last 2. Onyemata the last 2 is bad. He's showing signs of life. He's showing
Yeah.
signs of life.
And what's their record again? 6 out of 8 games. So I think
I'm not saying he's having a good season. I'm just saying the last 2 games he's
you're right.
shown
I'll
up
take
a little
that.
more.
Yeah, point well taken. But I think we all agree that this unit should be stepping up with the injuries in the secondary, and that's not the case. And I think
We
it's
talked about how
exacerbated.
this team needs to look against Pittsburgh when we were talking about the quarterbacks. Look, Pittsburgh's got a medium level defense, so it's possible the offense isn't going to take major steps up. But if the defense doesn't play some bully ball at Pittsburgh against Kenny Pickett and a team that cannot run the ball,
I mean, Pete Werner may not be there.
I know they
Marcus
might have
Lattimore
Pete
may not
Werner,
be there. Marcus Davenport may
We don't
not
know
be
if
there.
Marshawn Lattimore is going to be back.
Yeah,
but
we don't know who's available.
They better
right?
look good
So,
in this game.
all right, question. And let's just talk about it. How do you think there is any risk for DA after the season if the season doesn't turn around? Nick, start with you.
I mean, there's so much that would have to go into that for it to get to that point. So I think it's hard to see it right now. I think a lot would have to go into that. But look, we're like, how many wins are we talking? What's the tenor in the locker room? There's just so many unknown variables that go into that. But I think, barring complete meltdown, I don't see it.
We know that Mickey Loomis analyzes things like we do a lot of times, which is, all right, let's bring some realism into this. How many games were we expected to win? What like I said,
I think
Vegas. No, but I'm saying under the circumstances, because of the injuries they have had, Vegas has listed the Saints as the favorite in 3 games this year. So, like Mickey Loomis, it's not like they've been supposed to win 12 and they've only won 3. So I think he will judge DA accordingly.
Devil's advocate in that, though, what's DA's role in the odds?
Like, fair.
That's my question,
that's
right?
fair.
Wait,
but what I'm saying is, I am not totally shocked by, like, I've not gone into the games thinking the Saints can't lose today unless the coaches mess it up. Oh, the coaches messed it up. That's not how I felt about how this season is going. Like, the coaches haven't overachieved in any way, but they've achieved about what I expected for the most part. This last game was a bigger screw up than I thought. But what I was going to say is the bigger thing that would definitely come into play is, has he lost the locker room? Has he shown an inability to adjust? And I actually think those were some things that were positives on his ledger, really, after they got back from London and what they did over the last 4 weeks. But that's what he's going to be judged by over the next. If he lets this season spiral, if he lets 3-6 turn into a 4-13 finish or a 5-12 finish, then he's in trouble.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
but if the second half feels a lot like the first half did, and they finished 7-10, and missed the playoffs, but he never lost the locker room, and they've shown some areas where they figured some things out and improved, I'd be pretty stunned if he got fired after
Look,
1
I'll
year.
say this: like the fans want him gone today,
Yeah.
and if you get rid of him today, your next coach is a joke because no good coach that has. You want to hire somebody that has options because that means they're good and they're coveted, and they might not pick you, but you want to be in that mix. And if you fire DA today, a coach that has any other option, you aren't even a consideration because you're getting fired off of Twitter, and you can't do that. So you want people that other people want. Like this offseason, they wanted Liam Cohen as our offensive coordinator. They were interested in him, maybe not to hire him, but like to at least talk to him and consider him. The Rams wanted him. He picked the Rams. Like you want to be in the mix for the Liam Cohens that are going to be the next round of head
Ain't worked out
coaches,
well for nobody.
and you're just in a bad situation if you
I
don't take that
I
seriously.
will take a turn as devil's advocate now, though. I think there is one scenario the Saints should at least consider and have the discussion, and that's the full rebuild that they've never done before.
But you don't start that today.
No, you don't start. He said, I think Kevin said,
No,
does he
no.
last the
I'm saying
season?
I'm speaking to Twitter. The Twitter
Yeah.
people that want him
No,
gone
but
today. Like,
but Kevin said, does he last the season? We were
Well, I
talking
didn't
Field
say during
Yates
last
and
season. I mean, like post. I'm just
yeah,
thinking
after this year,
After the end of the
does he get a
season.
second year?
Yeah.
And Field Yates was saying last week he could see the Saints continuing to operate and still be competitive next year. We were talking Andy Dalton could still be the quarterback and they could put some better pieces around him next year. That's how the Saints have typically operated. Maybe they'll keep operating that way. But I think there's a scenario they have to consider where they do just lick their wounds and eat some of the salary cap and load up on a couple draft picks and bring in a new coach and say, hey, we're doing a 3-year plan. We're going to do a 3-year reset, and we're going to not do it with all of Sean Payton's former assistants anymore. And we're going to let this roster reset. I think there is a possibility they consider that route for 2020. I think they have to have the conversation about doing it.
What's it look like to get there?
What's the biggest asset you have when you're doing a rebuild? It's your draft pick. It's your draft pick. You don't rebuild when you don't have a first round draft pick, though, right? Because
it's called Trevor Penning, Kevin. They have it,
and I'll play devil's advocate a little bit here, and this is just devil's advocate. I'm not with some factual information there. DA, he hasn't been a successful head coach, right, in the NFL. He hasn't shown that he can be a successful head coach. He was in a bad situation in Oakland. You can say, I mean, we know all that, but at the end of the day, you at some point you are what your record says you are, right? And so that's one thing too. How much was he in the decision making to get rid of Chauncey? How much was he in the decision making to say, I don't want Marcus Williams, I want to bring in Tyrann Mathieu or Marcus May, right? Like, and these are questions that I don't have the answer to, so I'm not going to be unfair to DA and say this is on him. That's the main thing I don't want to do because I don't want to spread misinformation. There's enough of that out there. But what I'm saying is, internally, if those are some of the things that he's done with the track record, then I think it's a fair question. I'm not saying that he needs to be fired or removed from his job. I'm not saying it. I'm saying that, there's not a track record of history. I mean, of success here, and almost every single decision that's been made this offseason has bit them. Some their fault, some not. Right? Trevor Penning hasn't played a snap. Chris Olave, great player. I trade Chris Olave for that pick in a minute. All right. The most valuable thing this organization would be that pick, and they don't have it no more. The guys that you got rid of, to bring in new players. So I think there's a lot of things that's went wrong. And I think Mickey has to look at his part in it. I think DA needs to look at his part in it. And, I just think it's a fair question. I don't think it's to the point where you fire the guy yet. I'm with you, Nick. After 1 year, you just kind of start to look like an unstable organization.
Well, if it's a mistake, you can fix it though. And I do think that was kind of my main argument for hiring him, because if you thought he was going to be a good coach and there was a chance of it, and there was enough track record here to believe in that, they should know better than us. But you can fix a mistake if you keep the guy in your building. If you let him out, he goes on, he becomes this great coach somewhere else, you can't bring him back. So if they come to a point where they say, hey, this was a mistake, you can fix it. But I'm not I'm not there. I don't know what it has to look like for me to feel that it's time to do that. I don't
You'll know
see
it when you see it, though.
I don't see it yet. I know things aren't going right.
And, well, I think to amplify my point, I think DA is part of a overall approach, which was let's keep this trajectory together. I think he goes out if that approach goes out.
Oh,
I don't
yeah,
think
agree. I
he's
agree
the
with that
one.
100%, yeah.
I don't think he's the one person that was the misstep in the equation.
No,
They should have hired Aaron Glenn and kept all the other same assistants, and DA's the one who doesn't know how to coach. It was, we thought this team had a chance to win another title or two, and we're going to keep going, and we want to keep all the same coaches and the culture and everything like that. He goes if they say, you know what, we have to admit we do have to reset.
Yeah, if it's this thing ain't going anywhere, let's just start over. Yeah, before you have success. If they have success and then the trajectory ends, obviously you keep your coach. But yeah, I agree.
Yeah. All right, good
That's
discussion.
the best way I've heard it put. Yeah,
thank you. Look at that. How many minutes did it take? We finally
it took us
made
an
a good
hour,
point.
to get to the point. All right, guys.
Start with that. Can you put that at the beginning?
Yeah, and you could just skip the rest of the 5. Don't even tell them where it is. So, all right, that's gonna do it for us. It's tough times in Saints land, but we're gonna be here. We're gonna be here to cover. We're gonna be here to talk about it. Please support us. NewOrleans.Football /subscribe. If you're watching this on YouTube, then it just popped up on the screen. Please support us. We need you, and you guys make this thing go. So for DJ, for Nick and Mike, we out.